Remembrance Day, November the 8th. Remember, November. Lest we forget, never forget. That is the slogan, right? That is what we say every Remembrance Day. We wear the poppy, right? We remember those who went and fought and died, those who came back, left their lives in the first place, picked up, left off everything that they were doing, went across the ocean, fought a war across multiple continents, came back, picked up, and carried on. Communism, an unstoppable force rising up in Europe from the Bolshevik takeover in Russia, threatening the rest of the governments in Europe and slowly creeping down in through Europe. The rise of National Socialism, the Nazi Party, the fascist regimes in Italy, what were they? They were a response to the rise of communism in Europe, right? There was Communist Party leaders in Britain, in France, right? There were National Socialists in Britain, in France, right? Not everything was local to Germany. And again, what happened in Germany with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis was a direct response to the Bolshevik takeover of that country. Okay? They took over the banks. They took over the media. They took over the education. They took over the judicial system. They took over every part of everyday life and was turning Germany into a communist cesspool. Okay? And before that, what? Germany had been battered by the Versailles Treaty, right? Taxed into oblivion. The Weimar Republic, basically a dummy republic set up to fail, right? To foster in, right, that vacuum that allowed communism to come in. And then that vacuum, right, that equal opposite reaction, which was National Socialism. Okay? Now, why do we celebrate Remembrance Day? Because we went and we fought Japan, we went and fought the Germans, and at the end of the day, Nazi Germany was defeated, the Empire of Japan was defeated, but what did we do? We left Europe to the communists, and they gobbled it up. And we've been in a Cold War ever since. And now those same forces that pervaded throughout Europe have now reached our shores. Now the whole thing was, lest we forget, never forget. Well, we have gone and we have forgotten. We have forgotten that those men and women had their part. They did not fight and die and sacrifice everything they had for what our country is turning into today. On the contrary, they fought for the exact opposite of what is going on today. And anybody who's in the armed forces that claims to have any respect for these veterans, you should be ashamed of yourself in light of what's going on. We collectively should all be ashamed of ourselves. You should be ashamed of all of your own sin and your own wickedness, and then we should be double ashamed of our entire country and what we've turned into. Lest we forget, we have forgotten and have allowed those same forces that we fought against to take over our shores. Those men did not die in vain. We cannot allow their death to be in vain. We know that there were two wars being fought. There's a war that the people fight, and then there's the war that's going on behind the scenes, right? And what's actually going on behind the big tables at the United Nations between the big technocrats, the big corporations, right? The international bankers, right? That's why wars are fought. Resources, right? The controlling of populations, the testing out and the rolling out of new systems. That is what war is for. Dwight D. Eisenhower, he warned of the military-industrial complex and how it can get out of control if left unchecked. Voila, today. Anyways, not talking about all that stuff. Remembrance Day. Remember. If we don't want a repeat of the 1940s, we need to understand. There's a book called Hitler's Willing Executioners, okay? And no matter what you want to look at, if you're going to look at Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, right? Any of them. But this book, Hitler's Willing Executioners, it talks about how the German people could have gotten to the point where they followed Adolf Hitler without question. Whatever your view is on Adolf Hitler, World War II, and whatnot, the whole concept of how do you get a population of seemingly normal people, normal society, and how you get them to comply, right? And break down their barriers because there's an invisible enemy that they have to fight. Okay? And you convince them with propaganda and with a steady dose of propaganda over and over and over again. You tell a lie enough, it becomes the truth. The bigger the lie, the more people are bound to believe it. Okay? So what we have here is a situation where the lie is being told, the drip of propaganda is being flushed into our bodies, into our subconscious, right? And they don't give you any dissent, right? And no opportunity for dissent. They give you the information. They give you the reports, right? This is 1984, where they revise history and give you the history that they would have you know, they would have you understand, right? Because their history has to fit their current narrative, right? And so that's what you see. You go through the internet. It's not the internet of things anymore. It's the internet of censorship, right? The internet of the censorship of things, right? Only selected things can be talked about, right? And most of the time you see it, they're not talked about. They're not discussed. There's no critical thinking, right? There's no room for dissent. There's no room to ask a question, right? That is tyranny. How do you get a group of seemingly normal people initiated into a cult? Slowly, steadily, right? Up the propaganda, continue the propaganda, up the propaganda, continue the propaganda. We're going to find ourselves in a situation, okay, where you got an unstoppable force against the immovable object, okay? And we don't want either of those sides, right? We don't want communism, but do we want the opposite solution for it? That's what they're ramping everybody up for. Remember those who served. Remember those who died. Don't let that be in vain.